You're holding on to weight you never named, choices you can't take back, moments you wish you could rewrite. And every day you feel the past pulling at you like an anchor. But the Stoics saw regret differently, not as something to hate, but as something to use, to shape, to transform. There's a simple, daily Stoic habit, brutally honest, uncomfortable, and absolutely necessary, that won't change what happened, but will strip the poison out of it and give you back your power. This isn't about pretending you're fine. It's about facing the truth and building something stronger from it. Subscribe for more Stoic audiobooks and daily guidance to rebuild your mind, one truth at a time. Chapter 1. The Weight You Carry. Understanding the architecture of regret, you know the feeling. 3 a.m, dark room, your eyes open for no reason. And there it is, that moment you wish you could take back. That decision that split your life into before and after. The relationship you destroyed. The opportunity you let slip. The man you should have been when it mattered most. Regret doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock. It lives in you like smoke in wood, invisible until pressure makes it visible, heat makes it rise. Most men carry regrets they've never spoken aloud. They file them away in the basement of consciousness, thinking distance equals resolution. But filing isn't healing. Distance isn't closure. You can run from a burning building, but if the fire's inside you, geography changes nothing. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He understood something most men discover too late. Regret isn't about what happened. It's about the story you tell yourself about what happened. And that story runs on repeat, carving deeper grooves with every replay. Here's the truth they don't tell you in therapy offices or self-help seminars. You will make mistakes. You will hurt people. You will choose wrong. You will waste years on paths that lead nowhere. This isn't pessimism, it's physics. Show me a man who's lived, and I'll show you a man with scars. The question isn't whether you'll have regrets. The question is whether you'll let those regrets define the architecture of your remaining days. Think about the last time regret hit you hard. Not the background radiation kind, the acute kind that stops your breath. What were you doing? Probably something ordinary. Driving, showering, making coffee. Regret doesn't need special occasions. It ambushes you in the mundane moments when your defenses are down and your mind wanders into territory you've marked as forbidden. That's the first thing to understand. Regret is a habitual visitor. It has patterns. It has favorite entry points. And like any intruder, it exploits weakness. Mental doors left unlocked, emotional windows left open. The Stoics had a different relationship with past mistakes than we do. They didn't pursue forgetfulness or redemption. They pursued transformation through radical honesty. Epictetus, who started life as a slave, who knew degradation and powerlessness intimately, taught his students, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. But he didn't mean this as a platitude. He meant it as a practice. Most men approach regret like they approach a wound. They want it gone, clean, healed, invisible. They want to feel nothing when they touch the memory. But the Stoics understood that scar tissue is stronger than original skin. They weren't interested in making regret disappear. They were interested in metabolizing it, turning poison into medicine, weakness into wisdom. You've probably tried to outrun your regrets. Work harder, drink more, date someone new, move to a new city, start over. The geography of escape, the chemistry of numbness, the mythology of the fresh start. And it works. For a while. Until 3 a.m, dark room, eyes open. There it is. Because regret isn't a location you can leave. It's a conversation you're having with yourself about yourself. And until you change the nature of that conversation, changing the scenery is just set design. Let me tell you what regret actually is, stripped of poetry and psychology. It's your mind trying to solve a problem that no longer exists. It's running simulations of alternate histories. It's the part of you that thinks if you just replay the moment enough times, analyze it, and deeply, suffer enough intensely, you'll discover the hidden door that leads back to the choice point where you can choose differently. But there is no door. The moment is gone. The choice is made. The consequences are set. And your mind doesn't accept this. It can't. Because accepting it means accepting your own fallibility, your own blindness, your own capacity to cause irreversible harm through ignorance or weakness or momentary surrender to impulse. Seneca, writing to his friend Lucilius, said, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future, not to amuse ourselves with either hopes or fears, but to rest satisfied with what we have, which is sufficient." Read that again. Rest satisfied with what we have. Not what we wish we had, not what we almost had, not what we deserve to have. What we have, right now, after all the mistakes, after all the losses, after all the bridges burned and opportunities missed. This is where the work begins. The habit that erases regret, and we'll get to the mechanics of it, the daily practice of it, doesn't start with action. It starts with a shift in vision, a fundamental reorientation of how you view time, choice, and consequence. Most men see their past as a series of forks in the road, and regret is the pain of having chosen wrong. They live in a state of chronic second-guessing, eternally standing at an intersection that no longer exists, pointing at the path not taken and saying, "That's where happiness lived. That's where I should be." But the Stoics saw time differently. They saw it as a river. And you are in the river, and the water that passed you 10 seconds ago is already miles downstream, shaping shores you'll never see. You can't swim backward. You can only choose your relationship with the current. This isn't mystical. This is practical. Because when you spend your energy grieving roads not taken, you're not present for the road you're on. You're not scanning for danger. You're not noticing opportunities. You're not building. You're haunting your own life like a ghost, present but not participating, there but not here. Every man I've known who transformed his relationship with regret, and I mean genuinely transformed it, not just managed it or suppressed it, had to face one brutal question. What am I getting from this regret? Because here's what no one tells you. Regret serves a function. It's not random suffering. It's not purposeless pain. On some level, often unconscious, you're choosing it, you're maintaining it, you're feeding it. For some men, regret is a form of self-punishment. They believe suffering proves sincerity. If they hurt themselves enough with memory, maybe it balances the scales. Maybe it earns them the right to move forward. Regret becomes penance, and penance becomes identity. For others, regret is a shield. As long as they're paralyzed by past mistakes, they don't have to risk new ones. Regret keeps them safe, small, contained. If you never try, you never fail. If you never fail, you accumulate no new regrets. The logic is perfect. The life is empty. And for some men, and this is the hardest one to admit, regret is a story they tell themselves about who they could have been. It's a way of maintaining the fiction that they were once capable of more, that they once had potential, that life cheated them, or timing was wrong, or circumstances conspired, and if only things had been different. It's easier to regret the man you might have been than to become the man you could still be. Because becoming requires work, risk, failure, growth. Becoming requires you to exist in present tense, with present inadequacies, pursuing present goals that might not materialize. Regret lets you live in past, conditional tense, where the best version of yourself exists forever in amber, preserved in the moment before the mistake was made. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the known world, wrote this to himself: "The mind that is free from passions is a citadel. Man has no stronger fortress in which to seek shelter and defy every assault. Failure to recognize this is ignorance, but recognizing it, yet failing to seek shelter there, is misfortune indeed." He's telling you there's a place in your mind where regret can't reach you, not because you've forgotten, not because you've forgiven yourself, but because you've changed the fundamental relationship between observer and observed, between the you now and the you then. That place isn't achieved through meditation or mantras. It's achieved through a daily habit of brutal honesty, practiced consequence, and deliberate reorientation. It's achieved through what the Stoics called examining your impressions, looking directly at what your mind presents as truth, and asking, is this accurate? Is this useful? Is this within my control? Most of your regret lives in the gap between these three questions. The memory is accurate. Something happened, but the interpretation isn't. You've added layers of meaning, judgment, and catastrophizing that weren't present in the original event. You've turned a moment into a monument. The reflection might be useful. Learning from mistakes has value, but the rumination isn't. You passed the point of extractive wisdom months or years ago. Now you're just rehearsing pain. And none of it is within your control. The past is the definition of powerlessness. You can't change it. You can't fix it. You can't apologize your way back to the choice point. All your mental energy directed at what happened is energy not directed at what could happen. This is where men get stuck. They know intellectually that rumination is useless. They've read the books. They understand the concept. But knowing isn't doing. Understanding isn't practicing.
Icing. The habit that erases regret isn't a thought experiment. It's a daily discipline. And like all disciplines worth having, it's simple to explain and hard to maintain. It requires consistency. It requires honesty. It requires you to catch yourself in the act of regret and intervene, not with distraction or denial, but with a specific set of questions and a specific set of actions. Before we get to the mechanics, you need to accept something. Your regret isn't special. It's not unique. It's not evidence of your exceptional capacity for error or your particular unworthiness. Every man who's ever lived has a catalog of moments he'd undo if the universe kept receipts. The difference between men who are paralyzed by this and men who are propelled by this isn't the size or severity of their mistakes. It's their relationship to memory. One man lets the past colonize his present. Another man mines the past for useful material and leaves the rest behind. You're about to learn how to be the second man. Chapter 2. The Daily Examination, the Stoic Practice of Evening Inventory. The Romans had a practice that most modern men have never heard of, and it's the foundation of everything that follows. They called it the examen, the daily examination. Before sleep, alone in silence, a man would review his day, not casually, not performatively, with the precision of a surgeon examining a wound. Seneca described his version to his friend. I make use of this opportunity, daily pleading my case at my own court. When the light has been taken away and my wife, long aware of my habit, has fallen silent, I scan the whole of my day and retrace all my deeds and words. I conceal nothing from myself. I omit nothing. For why should I shrink from any of my mistakes when I can say, see that you do not do this any more, for the moment I pardon you? Read that last line again. For the moment, I pardon you. Not forever, not unconditionally. For the moment. Because tomorrow you'll be judged again by the same standard. Did you act with virtue? Did you choose with wisdom? Did you respond or react? This isn't self-flagellation. It's not lying in bed cataloging your failures and hating yourself into discipline. It's surgical assessment, clinical honesty. You're looking at your behavior from outside yourself, the way a general reviews a battle after it's done, marking what worked and what didn't, where discipline held and where it collapsed. Most men avoid this practice because they confuse it with guilt or shame. They think examining their mistakes means dwelling in them. But there's a difference between examination and rumination. Rumination is circular. It goes nowhere. It asks the same questions without seeking answers. Why did I do that? What was I thinking? How could I be so stupid? It's emotional weather that rolls through on schedule, familiar and useless. Examination is directional. It has a purpose. It asks, what happened? What was my role? What was within my control? What did I learn? What will I do differently tomorrow? The first generates regret. The second generates wisdom. Here's how this works in practice. Before sleep, you take 10 minutes, not in bed. Sitting, lights low, no phone, no distractions. You're creating a psychological container for honest accounting. You review your day backward, starting with the present moment and working toward the morning. This reverse chronology is important. It disrupts automatic narrative. When you review forward, your mind smooths over the rough patches, justifies the decisions, constructs a story where you're the reasonable protagonist. But backward review catches you off guard. It surfaces moments you'd prefer to skip. You're looking for 3 types of moments, actions you took that aligned with your principles. These you acknowledge. No performance, no celebration, just recognition. You did the hard thing when it mattered. You kept your word. You chose discipline over comfort. Mark it. Let your mind encode this as the pattern you're reinforcing. Actions you took that violated your principles. These you examine without mercy and without theater. What was the trigger? What was the thought before the action? What need were you trying to meet? What would aligned action have looked like? This isn't about shame. It's about identifying the mechanism of failure so you can interrupt it tomorrow. Opportunities you missed for virtue. The conversation where you stayed silent when truth needed speaking. The moment you could have helped, but didn't. The small choice that seemed insignificant, but revealed something about your character. These are often harder to see than outright failures, but they're where growth lives. Epictetus taught his students to examine their impressions, the initial reactions the mind offers in response to events. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Your impression, that bastard could have caused an accident. He's a reckless idiot. But is that accurate? Or is it just the first story your mind reached for? Examination means looking at your impressions with skepticism. Your mind presents interpretations as facts. Your job is to separate observation from narrative. Observation. A car changed lanes without signaling. Narrative. The driver is malicious, reckless, deserving of my anger. In the evening examination, you replay these moments and ask, did I accept the narrative as truth? Did I let the impression control my response? Or did I pause, question, and choose my reaction? Most men discover their regrets, live in the gap between impression and reaction. They wish they'd paused. They wish they'd questioned. They wish they'd chosen differently. The evening examination trains the pause. It makes visible the space where choice lives. Now here's where this connects to regret. When you practice daily examination, something shifts in how you relate to past mistakes, because you're no longer carrying them forward as undifferentiated mass. You're not dragging a sack of failures labeled "my shameful past." You've processed them, examined them, extracted the lesson, filed them in their proper category, completed experience. The man who never examines his day carries everything forward. Every mistake bleeds into the next day. Every failure echoes. Eve. Wry regret stays fresh because it's never been digested. He's walking around with years of unprocessed experience turning toxic in his gut. But the man who examines daily performs a kind of metabolic hygiene. He processes experience before it becomes regret. He catches mistakes while they're still lessons. He addresses misalignment while the memory is clear and the pattern is fresh. This is preventative medicine. You're building the habit of honest accounting so minor course corrections happen daily, not catastrophic reckonings every few years. Let me show you what this looks like with a real scenario. You're in a meeting. Your boss presents an idea that you know won't work. You have information he doesn't have. The respectful move is to speak up. But speaking up means contradicting him in front of others, means risking his pride, means potentially painting a target on your back. So you stay quiet. The meeting ends. The bad idea moves forward, and you carry a small piece of regret. Without examination, this moment disappears into the background noise of your life. You rationalize it. You tell yourself it wasn't your job to speak up. You tell yourself he wouldn't have listened anyway. You tell yourself you were being strategic, not cowardly. The story calcifies. The regret stays vague, unexamined, unresolved. but with examination. That night you sit with it. You replay the moment. You feel the tightness in your chest when you made the choice to stay silent. You identify the fear. Professional retaliation. You examine the impression. Speaking up will harm me. Is that true? Maybe, maybe not. But more importantly, was silence aligned with the man you're trying to become? Was the short-term safety worth the long-term self-respect? You don't judge yourself. You don't catastrophize. You just see it clearly. You chose comfort over courage. Small moment, small betrayal of self. But visible now, conscious now, and tomorrow, when a similar moment appears, and it will, you'll recognize it. You'll feel the same tightness. But this time you have a reference point. You have yesterday's examination showing you the cost of silence. You have a choice instead of a habit. This is how regret gets erased. Not by forgetting, not by forgiving, by transforming. You turn the raw material of regret into the refined material of wisdom through the daily practice of examination. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil." He's not being cynical. He's being prepared. He's examining his expectations before the day starts, so he's not surprised by human nature. And every evening, he examines what happened against what he expected, refining his understanding of both the world and himself. You need both practices. Morning intention. Evening examination. The morning sets the standard. The evening measures the gap. And here's what most men miss. The evening examination isn't about achieving perfection. It's about maintaining consciousness. It's about staying awake to your own patterns, your own triggers, your own drift toward misalignment. Perfection is a destination. Examination is a practice. One is impossible. The other is available right now. The men who master this, and I mean genuinely master it, not just practice it occasionally when they're feeling virtuous, develop something the Stoics called prosoche, constant attention. They become present to their own lives in real time. They catch themselves in the moment of choice, not hours later in the moment of regret. This is the skill underneath all other skills. This is the foundation of self-mastery, not willpower, not discipline. Attention, sustained, trained. Ruthless attention to the gap between your principles and your actions. Start tonight, 10 minutes before sleep. Review your day backward. Look for the moments where you were tested. Look for the moments where you passed or failed the test. Don't judge. Don't justify. Just see. Do this for 30 days, and you'll notice something strange. Your regrets start to lose their power. Not because the past changed, because you changed. You're no longer at war with what happened. You've processed it, learned from it, filed it away as data, not drama. The weight lifts, not all at once, gradually, like morning fog burning off in sunlight. This is the mechanism. This is the practice. This is where erasure begins. Chapter 4. The Dichotomy of Control, Releasing What You Cannot Change. There's a line that separates men who drown in regret from men who learn from it. That line is acceptance. Not acceptance as surrender. Not acceptance as passivity. Acceptance as clear-eyed recognition of reality. What happened, happened. What is, is. Your opinion about it changes nothing. Your anger about it changes nothing. Your desperate wish that it were different changes nothing. The only thing you control is what you do next. Epictetus built his entire philosophy on this foundation. He was born a slave, literally owned by another man. And somewhere in that experience, probably after years of powerlessness, he discovered the one territory where he remained sovereign, his own mind. He taught, some things are within our power, while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and in short, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, reputation, office, and in short, whatever is not of our own doing. Read that carefully. Your body isn't within your power. It ages, it breaks, it fails despite your best efforts. Your reputation isn't within your power. People will judge you, misunderstand you, spread lies about you regardless of your character. Your outcomes aren't within your power. You can work with excellence and still lose the contract. You can love with devotion and still lose the relationship. The only territory you control is internal. Your thoughts, your interpretations, your choices, your responses. This isn't philosophical abstraction. This is the key to erasing regret. Because most of your regret lives in the territory you don't control, trying to change what can't be changed. You regret what you said 5 years ago. Can you change it? No. Can you take it back? No. Can you erase it from the other person's memory? No. So, why are you spending energy on it? Why are you replaying it? Why are you punishing yourself with the memory? Because you haven't accepted the dichotomy of control. You're still living as if desire changes reality, as if suffering changes the past, as if regret serves some redemptive function. It doesn't. It just costs. Time, energy, presence, peace. Everything you have that's valuable, you're spending on what you can't change. Let me show you what this looks like in real life. You made a business decision that failed. Cost you money, cost you time, cost you reputation. The decision is behind you. The consequences are unfolding. And every day you wake up replaying the choice, torturing yourself with alternate scenarios. If only I'd done more research. If only I'd listened to that warning. If only I'd waited. What are you controlling with this mental activity? Nothing. The decision is made. The money is spent. The reputation is damaged. Your regret changes none of these facts. It just ensures you carry the weight forward into every present moment. Now consider the same scenario through the dichotomy of control. What's outside your control? The past decision, the lost money, what people think, what happened. What's inside your control? What you do next, the lesson you extract, the system you build to prevent similar mistakes, your interpretation of the failure, your response to the consequences. Same facts, different relationship. One generates paralysis, the other generates movement. Most men resist this framework because it feels like letting themselves off the hook. They think accepting what they can't change means not caring about what happened. They think releasing regret means declaring the mistake didn't matter. But that's confusion. Acceptance isn't absolution, it's accuracy. Yes, you made the mistake. Yes, it had consequences. Yes, you wish you'd chosen differently. All of that can be true while also accepting that replaying it changes nothing. Seneca wrote, "A man is as unhappy as he has convinced himself he is. Your suffering isn't proportional to what happened. It's proportional to your interpretation of what happened and your relationship to that interpretation." Two men make the same mistake, same consequences, same losses. 5 years later, one is still imprisoned by it, unable to risk anything new because he's certain he'll fail again. The other has extracted the lesson, adjusted his approach, and moved forward into new territory. Same past, different present. The difference isn't circumstances, it's acceptance of the dichotomy. Here's the practice. Every time regret surfaces, and you'll know the feeling, that tightness in your chest, that mental loop starting, you ask 3 questions. Question 1. What part of this is within my control right now? Not what was within your control then, right now, in this present moment. Can you change what happened? No. Can you control how other people remember it? No. Can you erase the consequences? No. So what can you control? Your interpretation, your response, your next action, your commitment to doing better. Strip away everything outside your power, and what remains is small, but it's yours. Question 2. What am I avoiding by focusing on this regret? This is the hard one, because often regret is a comfortable prison. It lets you stay small. It lets you avoid new risks. It gives you an excuse for inaction. I can't move forward until I've processed this. I can't try again until I've fully healed from the last time. But full healing never comes. Full processing never completes. You're using regret as a shield against the discomfort of growth.
You're using it as permission to stay stuck. Be honest. What would you have to do if you released this regret? What risk would you have to take? What uncomfortable truth would you have to face? That's what you're really avoiding. Question 3. If I can't change the past, what can I control about my future? This redirects your energy. You've acknowledged what you can't change. You've identified what you're avoiding. Now you focus on the territory where your power actually exists. Forward action. What specific behavior will you change? What specific system will you build? What specific boundary will you enforce? Not vague aspirations, concrete commitments, small enough to start today, clear enough to measure tomorrow. This is the 3-question protocol. It takes 2 minutes, and it interrupts the regret loop before it can colonize your day. You're not suppressing the feeling. You're not denying what happened. You're just redirecting your mind from powerless rumination to powerful action. Marcus Aurelius used a version of this constantly. You can see it in his private writings. He's talking to himself, reminding himself where his power lives. You have power over your mind, not outside events. He wrote this not once, but dozens of times in different forms, because he knew he'd forget, because he knew his mind would drift into territory it couldn't control. So he practiced the reminder, daily, repeatedly, until it became reflex. You need the same practice, because your mind is wired for regret. It's wired to replay mistakes. It's wired to search for the hidden solution that might undo what's done. This isn't a flaw. It's evolutionary caution. Your ancestors survived because they learned from danger, and learning required remembering. But your mind doesn't distinguish between useful memory and destructive rumination. It just runs the program. Your job is to interrupt the program, to separate what's yours from what isn't, to focus energy where energy can actually create change. Let me give you a harder example, one that most men face at some point. You hurt someone you loved, not through malice, through ignorance, through weakness, through being less than you should have been in a moment that mattered. The relationship ended. You carry guilt. Years later, it still surfaces. You wish you could apologize again, explain again, make them understand that you're different now, that you see what you couldn't see then. Apply the dichotomy. Can you control whether they forgive you? No. Can you control whether they understand your growth? No. Can you control whether the relationship could have worked? No. Can you control the past version of yourself that made those mistakes? No. What can you control? How you treat your current relationships, the patterns you've identified and changed, the boundaries you now enforce, the self-awareness you've built, the commitment you make to never repeating those specific failures, the man you're becoming through the lesson you extracted. That's it. That's your territory. Everything else is imagination, fantasy, wishful thinking disguised as processing. You're spending real energy on fictional scenarios. You're investing in outcomes you can't influence. You're trying to control what exists outside your power. Stop. Not because it doesn't matter, because it does matter, and the only way to honor what happened is to extract wisdom and apply it forward. Backward focus is waste. Forward focus is respect. The Stoics were obsessed with this principle because they lived in a world that made its truth obvious. Seneca watched friends executed by emperors. Epictetus lived as property. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while plague ravaged it and enemies attacked its borders. They couldn't control outcomes. They could only control their response to outcomes. And they discovered something you need to learn. When you release what you can't control, you don't lose power. You gain it, because all the energy you were wasting on the impossible becomes available for the possible. All the mental space occupied by regret becomes available for creation. All the suffering directed at unchangeable past becomes energy directed at shapeable future. This isn't numbness. This isn't apathy. This is precision. You're using your finite resources where they can actually generate returns. You're being strategic about your attention, your energy, your emotional investment. You're investing in assets that can't appreciate. The past is a closed market. It will never give you a return. But you keep pouring resources into it because the habit feels like duty, feels like care, feels like something other than waste. It's waste, and at some level you know it. That's why it hurts, not just because of what happened, because of what you're doing with what happened. Here's the shift that changes everything. Stop asking, why did this happen? Start asking, what am I going to do about this? Stop asking, how could I have been so blind? Start asking, what can I see now that I couldn't see then? Stop asking, will they ever forgive me? Start asking, how will I demonstrate that I've learned? Stop asking, what if I'd chosen differently? Start asking, what am I choosing right now? Every question is either oriented toward the territory you control or the territory you don't. And every question oriented toward what you don't control is a question that generates suffering without producing wisdom. This is the hard part, because letting go of regret means letting go of the story you've been telling about yourself, the story where you're the victim of your own mistakes, the story where you're forever marked by what you did wrong, the story where the past defines the present, and the present can't begin until the past is somehow resolved. But the past will never be resolved. There's no resolution available. There's no cosmic forgiveness that will descend and release you from what happened. There's only this, you, now, choosing what to do with the raw material of experience. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." He's not diminishing what happens. He's locating your power. Your power isn't in controlling events. Your power is in controlling your relationship to events. You can't change what you did. You can change what you do next. You can't control how others remember you. You can control who you become. You can't erase the consequences. You can learn from them. You can't undo the pain you caused. You can commit to causing less pain going forward. That's the territory of control. That's where your sovereignty lives. And when you learn to operate exclusively in that territory, not because you're avoiding responsibility, but because you're accepting reality, regret loses its grip. Not overnight, gradually, like water wearing down stone. Each time you catch yourself in the loop, each time you apply the 3 questions, each time you redirect energy from past to present, the pattern weakens, the habit fades, the weight lifts. And one day, not soon, but eventually, you'll notice the regret trying to surface, and you'll look at it with something like curiosity instead of dread. You'll think, there's that old pattern, there's that old story. But I'm not that person anymore. I've extracted the lesson. I've made the changes. I'm done carrying this. And you'll set it down, not through force, through readiness, through having genuinely metabolized the experience and integrated the wisdom, through recognizing that continuing to carry it serves nothing except the illusion of penance. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." 3 words, a lifetime of practice. Because your mind will drift. It will wander into territory it can't control. It will replay what's finished. It will imagine what's impossible. And your job, repeated daily, moment by moment, is to bring it back, to confine it, to the present, to redirect it to what's actual, what's actionable, what's yours. This is the practice. This is the discipline. This is how regret gets erased, not by forgetting, not by forgiving, but by recognizing the dichotomy and choosing to invest your finite resources in the territory where investment creates returns. The past is closed. The future is imaginary. This moment is all you have, and in this moment, you have enough power to choose what happens next. That's not everything, but it's enough. Chapter 5. Memento Mori. Living backward from death, you're going to die. Not someday in the distant theoretical future. Someday soon. Could be decades. Could be years. Could be tomorrow. You don't know. No one does. And every day you wake up is a day closer to the last one. The Stoics kept this front of mind, not morbidly, practically. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now,
Let that determine what you do and say and think. Seneca told his students to practice dying every day. Epictetus taught that a philosopher should have death constantly before his eyes. This seems dark. It's not. It's liberating. Because when you internalize the reality of your mortality, really internalize it, not just intellectually acknowledge it, your relationship to regret fundamentally changes. Most men live as if they have infinite time. They'll fix that relationship later. They'll pursue that dream eventually. They'll have that hard conversation when the timing is right. They'll apologize when they've found the perfect words. They'll become who they want to be after they handle a few more obligations. Later, eventually, someday, when. And then decades pass, and the relationship ends, and the dream becomes impossible, and the person they needed to talk to dies, and the words they were preparing are obsolete, and the obligations multiply instead of diminish, and they wake up one morning realizing they spent their finite time preparing for a life they never actually started living. That's the regret that destroys men. Not what they did, what they didn't do, the calls not made, the risks not taken, the truths not spoken, the love not expressed, the life not lived. Memento Mori, remember you must die, is the antidote. Not because thinking about death is pleasant, because it's clarifying. It burns away the nonsense. It reveals what actually matters. It forces the question, if I died tonight, what would I regret not having done? And then it demands the next question, so why aren't you doing it now? Most of your current behavior is based on the assumption that you'll have time to course correct later. You're tolerating situations you shouldn't tolerate. You're delaying actions you know you should take. You're investing energy in things that don't matter while neglecting things that do. All because you're operating on infinite time. Future you will handle it. Future you will be braver. Future you will have clarity. But future you is a fiction. There's only now you. And now you is making choices that now you will either be proud of or regret when looking back from whatever future actually arrives. Here's the practice. Once a week, imagine you've just received terminal news. 6 months to live. That's it. No miracle cure. No reversal. 6 months and you're done. Everything you haven't done stays undone. Everyone you haven't told stays untold. Everything you've been delaying stays delayed. Sit with that. Feel it. Let it be real for 10 minutes. And then ask, what would I regret not having done? Who would I regret not having called? What would I regret not having said? What would I regret not having tried? What would I regret not having been? Write it down, specific, concrete, not vague aspirations, actual actions, actual conversations, actual choices. And then, this is critical, look at your list and ask, what's actually stopping me from doing these things now? Because here's what you'll discover. Most of what you're delaying has nothing to do with timing or readiness or circumstances. You're delaying because it's uncomfortable, because it's risky, because it's hard, because it's easier to tell yourself you'll do it later than to admit you're choosing not to do it now. The terminal diagnosis removes that luxury. 6 months left, and suddenly the discomfort of the conversation matters less than the regret of silence. The risk of the attempt matters less than the certainty of never having tried. The hardship of growth matters less than the tragedy of remaining unchanged. Memento Mori doesn't give you a terminal diagnosis. It just forces you to live as if you might have one, because you might. Every person who died unexpectedly thought they had more time. Every man who regrets inaction thought he'd eventually act. The only difference between them and you is timing, and timing is outside your control. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius, "Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books each day. The one who puts the finishing touches on their life each day is never short of time. Balance life's books each day, meaning live so that if tonight were your last night, you'd have no major regrets, not perfect completion, but no gaping absences, no obvious cowardice, no glaring omissions. Most men can't say this. They know there are conversations they're avoiding. They know there are dreams they're neglecting. They know there are versions of themselves they're not becoming. They know, and they tell themselves they'll handle it. Later. Eventually. When. But Seneca is saying, stop waiting. Finish your life today. Not literally, but emotionally, spiritually, relationally. Handle today what needs handling today so that tonight, if it's your last night, you can look back and think, I did what mattered, I said what needed saying, I was who I needed to be. That's the standard, not perfection, completion. Here's what this looks like practically. You've been thinking about calling your father. The relationship is complicated. There's history. There's hurt. There's silence that's become its own kind of communication. And you tell yourself you'll call when you've processed more, when you have clarity, when you know what to say. Memento Mori asks, what if he dies tomorrow? What if you die tomorrow? Will you be satisfied with the silence, with the unspoken words, with the relationship as it currently exists? If the answer is no, then the only rational response is to call. Now. Today. Not with perfect words, with honest words. Not with complete clarity, with authentic attempt. Because incomplete communication is better than permanent silence. You've been delaying a career change. The current path is safe, comfortable, known, but it's not aligned with who you're becoming. You know you should make a move. You've known for months, maybe years, and you tell yourself you'll do it when you've saved more, when the market is better, when you're more prepared. Memento Mori asks, if you died in this job, would you be satisfied with having spent your finite time in a role that didn't serve your growth? Would you be proud of the safety you chose, or would you regret the risk you never took? If regret is the answer, then the only rational response is to start the transition, not recklessly, but deliberately, with a timeline, with concrete steps, with the understanding that your time is finite and you're choosing how to spend it. This isn't about impulsive decisions, it's about honest assessment. You're using death, the certainty of it, the mystery of when, as a measuring stick for what matters. And most of what you're currently investing time in doesn't pass the test. The Stoics weren't being pessimistic. They were being realistic. And that realism generated urgency. Not frantic urgency, focused urgency. The kind that cuts through noise and identifies signal. The kind that stops tolerating what shouldn't be tolerated. The kind that starts attempting what needs attempting. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, most powerful man in the world, wrote this to himself. Think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly. He's not telling you to live as if you're dying. He's telling you to recognize you're always dying. Time is always running out. Every moment you waste is a moment you'll never get back. Every delay is a choice. Every later is a gamble that later will arrive. And here's how this connects to regret. When you live with death present, not as morbid obsession but as clarifying reality, you stop accumulating the regrets that come from postponement. You stop delaying the conversations. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop letting fear disguise itself as prudence. You act, you speak, you try, you risk. Not because you're reckless, because you're realistic, because you understand that the regret of action is temporary, but the regret of inaction is permanent. Think about your current major regrets. How many of them are things you did versus things you didn't do? For most men, the ratio is heavily skewed toward inaction. The chances not taken, the words not said, the love not expressed, the dreams not pursued. These regrets hurt more because they're open-ended.
You can't learn from them. You can't extract a clear lesson. You can only wonder what might have been. And that wondering is corrosive. It generates permanent what-if that has no resolution. Memento Mori closes this loop before it opens. When you're making decisions with death present, you choose differently. You err toward action instead of delay. You err toward honesty instead of comfort. You err toward growth instead of safety. Because you understand viscerally, not intellectually viscerally, that your time is limited and you'd rather regret something you attempted than something you avoided. Here's a practice that makes this real. Write your own eulogy. Not the public one, the honest one. The one that accounts for who you actually were, not who you pretended to be. The one that notes what you spent your time on, what you prioritized, what you avoided, what you became. Write it as if you died today. Based on the life you've lived so far, the choices you've made, the person you've been. Be honest. Be specific. Don't write the aspirational version. Write the actual version. And then read it. Sit with it. Feel it. Ask yourself, is this how I want to be remembered? Is this who I want to have been? Is this enough? If the answer is no, and for most men it will be, then you have data, you have clarity, you have a list of gaps between who you are and who you want to be, and you have a choice. Close those gaps or live with them. Most men choose to live with them. They read the gap. They feel uncomfortable. And then they file it away and go back to their habitual patterns. They tell themselves they'll address it later. They'll become that better version eventually. They'll close the gaps when circumstances align. But circumstances never align. Better versions don't spontaneously emerge. Gaps close through deliberate action, or they don't close at all. Memento Mori doesn't let you hide from this. Every week you're reminded. Time is running out. You're closer to death than you were last week. The gaps you haven't closed are gaps you might never close. The life you haven't lived is life you might never live. What are you waiting for? Seneca again. We are tight-fisted with property and money, yet think too little of wasting time, the one thing about which we should all be the toughest misers. You guard your money, you guard your possessions, you guard your reputation, but you waste your time like it's infinite. You spend it on things that don't matter. You invest it in outcomes you don't care about. You let it drain away through distraction, avoidance, and delay. And then you wonder why you're living with regret, why you feel like life is passing you by, why there's a gap between who you are and who you meant to be. The gap exists because you're living as if you have forever, and you don't. None of us do. Death is coming. The only questions are when and whether you'll have lived before it arrives. This isn't meant to generate anxiety. It's meant to generate clarity. When you internalize your mortality, your priorities simplify. The noise falls away. What matters becomes obvious, and the distance between knowing what matters and doing what matters shrinks to nothing. Because you can't defer anymore. You can't wait for better conditions. You can't postpone the life you know you should be living. Death removes that option. It forces the question, are you living or are you preparing to live? Most men are preparing. They're waiting for permission, for confidence, for certainty, for the perfect moment, for conditions to improve, for fear to disappear. But permission isn't coming. Confidence comes through action, not before it. Certainty is impossible. Perfect moments don't exist. Conditions won't improve on their own, and fear never disappears. You just get better at acting despite it. Marcus Aurelius. Do every act of your life as though it were the very last act of your life. Not because life is ending, because it might be. And if it is, you want this act, this conversation, this choice, this moment, to be representative of who you actually are, not who you're waiting to become. That's the shift, from waiting to being, from someday to today, from eventual to now, from the fiction of infinite time to the reality of finite moments. And when you make that shift, regret starts to dissolve. Not the old regrets. Those take time to process, but the new ones. The ones you would have accumulated through continued delay, those stop forming, because you're no longer postponing what matters. You're no longer choosing comfort over alignment. You're no longer living as if you'll get another chance. You're living as if this is your chance, your only chance, your last chance, because it might be. And that recognition, brutal, clarifying, liberating, is what transforms men from people who carry regret to people who generate pride, from people preparing to live to people actually living. The clock is running, death is approaching. The only question that matters is, what are you doing with the time you have left? Answer that honestly, act on it immediately, and regret loses its power, because you'll know, with the certainty that only comes from action, that you did what mattered while you still could. You came here carrying weight, regret, the kind that wakes you at 3 a.m, the kind that makes you wonder if you're capable of being the man you thought you'd become. Here's what you now know. Regret isn't your enemy. It's raw material. The Stoics understood this. They didn't seek to erase their mistakes from memory. They sought to metabolize them, to transform poison into medicine, to turn the weight of what happened into the strength of what happens next. The habit that erases regret isn't complicated. It's brutally simple. Examine your days with surgical honesty. Every evening, review what happened, not to judge yourself, to see yourself, to mark where you aligned with your principles and where you didn't, to process experience before it becomes regret. Train through voluntary discomfort. Prove to yourself that you can handle hard things, cold water, hunger, silence, physical pain. Build the evidence that comfort isn't requirement, it's option. So when the hard choice appears, you have reference points. You've done harder. Accept the dichotomy of control. Release what you can't change. Stop investing energy in the unchangeable past. Redirect everything toward the territory where your power actually lives. This moment, this choice, this action. Remember, you must die. Live with death present, not morbidly, practically. Use mortality as measuring stick for what matters. Stop postponing. Stop waiting for perfect conditions. Act now. Speak now. Choose now. Because later might not come. Practice negative visualization. Imagine losing what you have so you can see what you have. Wake up to presence before it becomes absence. Show up with attention. Express what matters. Be fully there while there's still time. These aren't 5 separate practices. They're 5 angles on the same practice, conscious living, being awake to your own life instead of sleepwalking through it. Choosing deliberately instead of defaulting habitually. Becoming the man you're capable of being instead of remaining the man you've always been. You know what you need to do. You've always known. This audiobook didn't tell you anything you didn't already suspect. It just made it conscious, named it, structured it, gave you the framework to act on what you've always known. Now you have no excuse, no confusion, no ambiguity. You know the path. You know the practices. You know what's required. The only question left is whether you'll walk it. I can't answer that for you. The Stoics can't answer that for you. Nobody can answer that for you. But I'll tell you this. Every man who walks this path looks back years later and thinks the same thing. I wish I'd started sooner. Don't be the man who wishes. Be the man who starts. Tonight, the evening examination. 10 minutes, that's all. That's the beginning. Everything else builds from there, but it has to start somewhere, and that somewhere is tonight. After you finish listening to this, before you sleep, 10 minutes of honest accounting. Can you do that? Just that? Just tonight? If you can do tonight, you can do tomorrow. If you can do tomorrow, you can do the week. If you can do the week, you can do the month. And if you can do the month, you've built a habit. And the habit becomes identity. And the identity becomes life. A life examined, a life trained, a life aligned, a life lived deliberately. a life without regret. Not because nothing went wrong, because you transformed what went wrong into wisdom. That's the promise of Stoicism. That's what's available, right now, to you. Pick up the hammer, strike the metal, start the work. The blade is waiting to be sharpened, and you're the only one who can do it.